Hello and welcome to Analytics for Small and Mid-Sized Nonprofits. My name is Dan Doyle. I'll be your host for this webinar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at fundraisingreportcard.com. And this webinar is being co-sponsored by the great people at Little Green Light and us over here at Fundraising Report Card. I won't spend a lot of time introducing myself, but in addition to being the Chief Evangelist at Fundraising Report Card, prior to that, I launched a mobile app fundraising toolkit called Charitable, and I was the CEO of the integrated fundraising agency, now Warwick Donor Digital. We have clients all across the country. You've got some of the most notable ones here, but in addition to those large notable clients, we had dozens and dozens of small and mid-sized clients all across the country, and we helped them raise money. And we did a lot of work helping them leverage analysis to the betterment of their fundraising program. So with that, why don't we get started? We have about 30 to 40 minutes here today, and so I want to make best use of your time. I'm going to ask you to start out wondering if any of these sound familiar. You're a development staff of one, and you also make the coffee in the morning. You don't have time. That's what this is all about. Analytics staff, what's that? You don't have the resources available to do analysis. And I don't have deep pockets to hire a fundraising consultant or buy BI tools. And heck, I don't even know what BI tools, by the way. They're business intelligence tools, and they're incredibly expensive. Finally, you know you should analyze your program, but it seems so complicated. Where do I start? Well, if you've asked yourself any or perhaps even all of those questions, then you've come to the right place. We're going to unpack a little bit about analytics for small and mid-sized nonprofits, where I pose to you that is actually more important. Analysis and data is more important to the small and mid-sized organizations than the larger organizations. We're going to do a deep dive into some of the important metrics, and then we'll end a little bit with an overview on some of the other metrics that might be available to you to analyze. I've got lots of links and lots of resources, and after this is all over, we will be sure and send a link to this recording and the presentation and all of the resources that are being made available here. So take some notes if you'd like, but do know that you'll get a recording of this. So today, what we're going to cover is first, why data should inform your fundraising strategy. I'm assuming you are all here because you believe it should, but it wouldn't be a bad idea as a foundational item to kind of talk a little bit about why data is so important for informing a fundraising strategy. We're also then going to get into the meat of it, which is what metrics should I measure? And I'm going to be talking a little bit about 3 cornerstone metrics that you should be measuring, any organization should be measuring, but again, most importantly, small and mid-sized groups. Once you have those metrics, how do you interpret them? What is the process for interpreting them and leveraging those metrics? And finally, we have a little analytics swag, and like I mentioned, a bunch of resources for you that we'll highlight here. The analytics swag is not quite Oscar swag, but it's what we do here when we're talking about analysis. All right, so starting out this talk, let's discuss a little bit about why data should inform your strategy in 2 parts. Part 1 are the 3 truisms I call of why data is important to informing fundraising strategy. 1, it is always better to have information than to not have it. We all know this to be true. You wouldn't go buy a car without looking at the price tag or determining how much it gets in gas mileage. Just like that, you really shouldn't be running a fundraising program without having information available to you. And we do know, research shows again and again and again, without a plan backed by data, organizations do not achieve as much as they are capable of achieving. And that holds true for nonprofits, and it holds true for fundraising. So data-backed plans always outperform when you don't have a data-backed plan. And we know that following your gut can lead you down the wrong path. I think it seems obvious to us, all of these now, but we do know that all too often, organizations follow their hearts and they forget to do due diligence with hard data in fundraising and even otherwise in programs. So I pose to you, these are the 3 fundamental truisms of why data should inform your strategy, part 1. And part 2 is a little bit about what you can then do with this data. So why is it, now that we've said it's important, why is it going to inform what you do? Well, first, if you measure certain metrics, you understand those trends, you can understand donor behaviors better, and they can help you determine what strategies to implement. Once you have strategies in place, you can then implement specific tactics that drive your strategy. So metrics help inform strategy, help inform tactics, and once you have those tactics tactics in place, you can measure their effectiveness by looking back at the data metrics and that they guided your overall initial strategy decision. It's this feedback loop that's very, very important. Determine metrics, develop strategies, implement tactics, and review those tactics through metrics and the data every single year. Develop a consistent feedback loop so you do not rely on your gut instincts or the status quo of what you've always been doing. You're critically assessing your program all the time. Okay, that was just a little bit about why we should be using data to inform our strategy. So, what metrics should we be measuring? So the big answer is it depends. One size doesn't fit all. When I was the president and CEO of Mal Warwick Donor Digital, the founder, Mal Warwick, would always answer almost every question the client would ask. It depends. And that is true here. There is no one size fits all in fundraising metrics, but we'll talk about some that are super important. And why does it depend? Well, it depends what you're trying to accomplish with your program. If you're looking to grow your program, you're going to have certain metrics at play. If you're looking for efficiencies in your program, you're going to have different metrics in play. If you're looking to enjoy upgrades and maybe move the top of your file in major giving, you're going to have different metrics in play. So one size doesn't fit all. So you really should be selecting those metrics that are most meaningful to where you are and where you want to take your program and the strategies that you're putting in place. But with that said, we have to start somewhere. So I'm going to start with what I also call the 3 cornerstone metrics of fundraising. And I think these, again, are most applicable to small and mid-sized organizations just like you. The first cornerstone metric, overall growth in donors and dollars. Yes, that is 2 metrics, growth in donors and growth in dollars. But let's call it 1, growth, program growth. And there's a very important reason to look at growth in donors and also growth in dollars, and we'll get to that in just a minute. The second cornerstone metric is donor and donation retention rates. Again, yes, it is 2, donor retention rate and donation retention rates. And just like growth, we think it's very important in fundraising report cards to look at donors and donations and the retention rates of those. Retention measures loyalty in its essence, and you always want to be raising more money and having more loyal donors. And finally, the often discussed donor lifetime value. It seems like this scary black box, and how does it get calculated? I'll give you a resource for actually how to calculate that. We have tools in Fundraising Report Card that automatically calculate that for our clients. And donor lifetime value is probably one of the most important metrics that any organization can track, because it tells you how much an individual will be giving over their anticipated lifetime to your organization. So starting out, ask yourself, what's your data story? Which metrics will illuminate that story and help inform your strategic fundraising decision? I say start with these 3 cornerstones and add to them as you go along the way. But let's make sure you focus, people. Let's stay focused. You could have dozens of fundraising metrics. And as I put here, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. You don't want a big data dashboard and to get lost in the dozen metrics when there are probably only 3 to 5 that are really driving the strategies that are at play. There are 3 to 5 key fundraising metrics that you should look at. We'll talk at 3, and then I suspect that when we're done, you'll have another couple, 2 or 3 that you might want to add to your toolbox. But do avoid overanalyzing. I think that's important to say. You don't need 24 metrics of your program. Keep it to the couple few that you know will really most significantly drive your strategy. And when you're looking to analyze a program, look at 5 years. Here on the left, you're seeing, I don't know, a dozen years or so of data. That's a lot of data, and what gets lost is the trend. You can't really see the overall trend. You can see that it's grown over the last dozen plus years, but you really can't see anything that's meaningful to right now. Most recent performance is a key indicator of future performance. So I always suggest look at 5 years. It's a wonderful slice of time. If you've got data integrity, you feel confident in the data you have, then you really should be looking at 5 years. On the right-hand side here, what you see is a 5-year snapshot of the data on the left-hand side. And it's much more meaningful because what we do know is the program was growing, and this organization I happen to know in 2013 and 14, they had exceptional large gifts came in. So actually the growth pattern there is even more significant than it shows. Message here is data overload can prevent you from seeing important recent trends, and recent performance is far more meaningful than distant performance. And I say start at 5 years, but don't look less. Here's our 5-year snapshot again on the left. As you can see on the right, 1 year tells you absolutely nothing. So just like too much data isn't any good, too little data is just as problematic. A single point in time does not help you understand your program. It doesn't help you understand where you've been and possibly where you've been going. So let's look at 5 years worth of data, people. Okay, now let's look at the 3 cornerstone metrics that I've been talking about overall here. And it's first is growth in donors and dollars. And there's a key difference between these two that I think are very, very important. So let's look at growth in donors. This is the number of donors that you have who give to your program any fiscal year. So this is from 2013 to 17, so a 5-year time frame as we discussed. And it shows how many donors gave overall every single year. So in 2013, they had about 350, and around 2017, they had 250. So immediately, one would think this would raise a real red flag that they have had decreases in the number of donors year over year over year. And that's an important metric to know. We have fewer and fewer donors. But what this doesn't tell us, and why we think you should not only measure donors but also dollars, is there was a very concerted strategy at play in this organization, and that was to raise more money from the top of their file. Again, I mentioned 13, 14 had an exceptional gift, and when you take those large exceptional gifts away, the increase is even more prominent. So what I hope you see here is there's really 2 different data stories taking place. There's a donor data story and there's a dollar data story. So be sure and look at both donors and dollars in overall growth year over year, because they can and often do tell you different stories. So that's metric number 1, overall growth in donors and dollars. That should be very easy for you to calculate. We do this automatically at Fundraising Report Card on data that clients upload into their dashboards. And you can very easily see here why those 2 views are important. Okay, let's move on to the second cornerstone data point. We believe in measuring donor and donation again. Retention rates. Why retention rates? Well, retention rates really do speak to loyalty. The higher the retention rate, the higher the loyalty. The lower the retention rate, the lower the loyalty, and the more people are churning or lapsing out of your program. And that's an expensive fundraising program. So we want high retention rates, especially if you're a small or mid-sized organization. Again, I'm going to hone in again here on the difference between donor retention rates and donation retention rates, just like I did in donor and donation growth. So on the left-hand side here, I pulled up donor retention rate. And we know for this organization, if you can see it kind of in the middle, I pulled it out, their overall donor retention rate was up 52% for the $250 to $1,000 group. And then on the right-hand side, what you can see here is their donation retention rate was up 84%, so it was even larger. So again, the data story is consistent with this organization. They were raising more money from fewer donors. So we were maybe not retaining as many donors, but they're retaining more revenue from those donors. And that's really important. We like to say retention is new acquisition, and we all know that acquiring new donors at nonprofits is getting more and more difficult and more expensive. So really measuring retention and impacting retention is critically important to your success. Otherwise, you are quite likely to be caught in sort of a new acquisition doom loop. Again, measure both donor and donation retention rates as they tell different stories for your organization. They do here. That's the second one. First is donor and donation growth. You might say those are 2 different metrics, and indeed they kind of are. The second cornerstone is donor and donation retention rates. You've got to measure retention rates. And this applies whether it's a direct response program or a major giving program or a mid-market program or a monthly sustainer program. Heck, you could even apply this to event fundraising, to corporate and foundation fundraising. Retaining those donors is critically important to your success. We also think it's pretty important to measure retention rates by loyalty. How do we think of loyalty? We think of loyalty in 3 buckets. And on this chart on the left here, you can see the green, which is first-time donor retention, the blue, which is repeat donor retention, and the purple, which is reactivated donor retention. These are 3 different loyalty buckets. The least loyal donors to an organization are those who are first-time donors the previous year. They have the lowest retention rate. But it's really important to measure that because you want to make sure you're doing everything possible to ensure a brand new donor is retained year over year, because you quite likely spent a lot of money on that donor. So the lower line, the green line, which is right at about 30% for this organization, is first-time donor retention. That you want to focus on that. The top line are your most valuable donors, your repeat donors. Those are donors who give in year over year. And here they're at 66%, which is a pretty good benchmark. We'll talk about benchmarks at the end of this and why they're helpful and how they can be a little distracting. But you want to measure the loyalty of your repeat donors and their loyalty measured by their retention rate. And then finally, in the middle is the purple, which is the reactivated donors. Those are sort of the middle loyal individuals. Those are people who gave 1 year, lapsed another, and were reactivated. Why is it important to measure this? Well, unlike fundraisers, donors don't often think in 12-month cycles. They may give you a gift every 13 months or 14 months or 15 months. But if you actually talk to them on the phone, they'll say, yes, I give every year to the organization. So this is a pretty important group because it does indicate that not all donors are synced into your organization's fiscal year or the calendar year, and they will give on their own patterns, and oftentimes those patterns fall outside of a 12-month cycle. You're going to find that they're going to fall in the middle, and there's certain strategies you can implement to reactivate these donors who are lapsed. There are certain strategies that you can use to continue to reactivate repeat donors and continue to reactivate first-time donors. So these are 3 areas that I think are pretty important. So measure donor retention rates by first-time, repeat, and reactivated donor loyalty. And each audience will have its own metric and its own story, which may impact overall retention. For example, as a specific example, if you have very low first-time donor retention, you might want to implement a new donor welcome strategy, 3, 4, 5-part welcome series that allows you to engage the new donor and give them information about the organization and praise them for their contribution and the impact it's made on the work that you're doing. Okay, so retention rates by loyalty. All right, speaking of lapsed donors, because if they're not retained, they're lapsed, I thought it might be helpful to share with you. And again, we'll send this out as a link, so you'll get it. So don't worry if you don't have time to write it down, but oftentimes you're looking at retaining donors, and then the immediate thing you want to ask yourself is, what about all those lapsed donors? Why they haven't been retained? We've actually have a short article on how to retain lapsed donors. You can read it here at fundraisingreportcard.com/retain-donors. It's a great article. Go in and read it, and it gives you some really foolproof strategies to re-engage lapsed donors. All right, finally, we're doing really well on time here. Finally, we're going to talk a little bit about donor lifetime value. I actually probably talk a lot about donor lifetime value. It's very, very important. Everyone knows it's important, but people are frightened by it. They don't know how to calculate it. It's a confusing black box, but hopefully we'll demystify it here. And again, I'll tell you that at Fundraising Report Card, we actually have this that calculates automatically based on data people put in, so they don't actually have to go through the grinding details of figuring this all out. Okay, on the left here is you're going to see a fairly typical donor lifetime chart. And we've broken it down by giving levels, okay? There's an overall donor lifetime value and there's a giving level lifetime value. What lifetime value measures is it measures how much people will give and how long they will give to your organization. So how we calculate it is organizations send us their data, we upload it into their fundraising report card, we bucket people into these individual giving levels. We're looking at the $5,000 and above giving level. And then we calculate how long those $5,000 donors give and how much they give, and then we calculate an average. It's a specific average for the organization. So what we know here, and it's really important, is that their $5,000 donors are worth, on average, $14,000 over their lifetime. So if a $5,000 donor lapses, not only did they not get that $5,000, but they also didn't get that additional $14,000. So they're really missing out on about $15,000 in potential revenue. Measuring it year over year, like we have here in this 5-year time frame that I recommend, you can also see the changes. I highlight this one because there is a data story here, which is this organization lost their major giving officer at the end of their fiscal year 2016, rode about 8 months of 2017 without a major giving officer, and then hired someone. And lo and behold, no great surprise, the lifetime value of their largest donors of 5,000 above plummeted by 62% because they were not being renewed, they were downgrading, they were having a difficult time giving to the organization. Moral of the story, you want to raise major gifts, you really need to have a major giving officer. My third bullet point here, I'm going to change actually the graph for you. It's that this can actually, lifetime value, donor lifetime value can inform your new donor investment tolerances. And let me change the graph there so you can see. I've highlighted at the very bottom, you'll see in that gray area, the under $100 donors, which might be a typical newly acquired donor, right? So here we know the lifetime value of an under $100 donor is $139. But how does that inform investment tolerances or how much you want to invest in donor acquisition? Well, one might say if you're acquiring a donor and it costs $138, then you're making net money. I suspect you probably want more than $1 net from a donor that you acquire. So how this is probably more meaningful is when you look at your acquisition costs and say maybe you're spending $15 to acquire a donor, or even $30 or $50 to acquire a new donor. You can measure that against the lifetime value of the giving level for which that donor was acquired to determine, are you still investing wisely in new donor acquisition? So for this organization, if they're spending $139 or more, that's not a good investment. They are losing money on those newly acquired donors. Anything less than $139, they're netting money. I happen to know this organization acquires donors about $30. So there's about $190 additional lifetime value from those individuals. So donor lifetime value is incredibly important to organizations. And everyone wants to know how to calculate it. We calculate it for you at Fundraising Report Card based upon the actual data clients submit. But if you need a cheat sheet for that, you can actually go into the ultimate cheat sheet for lifetime value. Here's a very long link. Again, don't worry, we'll send that to you so that you'll be able to download the cheat sheet on how to calculate donor lifetime value. It explains what it is, how it can be useful, how are the different ways, and how we calculate it here. It's 2 pages, very, very easy reading for you. Okay, so we've talked about the 3 major metrics that I think you should be measuring: growth, retention, and lifetime value. But there are a whole bunch of other metrics out there that you might want to supplement with these 3. But I say start with those 3 in your Cornerstone, look at them for the last 5 years, and then add to those 3 those that speak to whatever strategies are in play with your organization. If I started out, are you growing the organization? Are you trying to raise more and upgrade people? Are you trying to affect loyalty in the organization? So there's a whole bunch of other metrics that are out there. We have a great cheat sheet. We don't have all the time in the world today, unfortunately, to go through these. But what I thought I would do is get you this resource and let you know that there's a lot of others. For example, if you're looking to run an efficient fundraising program, cost per donor acquired is pretty important, especially when you balance that against lifetime value. Cost per dollar raised is a very standard fundraising metric. It needs to be less than 25 cents on the dollar overall. For an organization is generally the rule. We certainly know that if you're running a direct mail program, those cost per dollar raised can be 60 cents, 70 cents. Major giving is in the teens. And so it's helpful to look at that metric in various channels. Upgrade and downgrade. Are you upgrading more than you're downgrading? Are you covering that? Is there coverage? Is there growth in the amount of donations by your upgrade coverage of your downgrade? Average donation amount, and how are you impacting that over a 5-year trend? Are you seeing increases in the average donation? Donation frequency. Have you implemented a monthly sustainer program? Are you asking your donors to give frequently enough, or do you ask once and then never ask again during the year? There are specific strategies you can implement if you want to increase the donor frequency, the number of donations given per year. Donor reactivation. You've got lapsed donors. What's your reactivation rate of those donors? And there are a whole lot more. This is a super helpful cheat sheet on fundraising metrics, and I think that you ought to download it if you're interested, and I'll be sure and send you that. So now we're going to kind of round out with, how do I interpret these metrics? So I gave you the 3 cornerstones. I suspect you're going to actually add another couple, 2, 3, 4, into your sort of portfolio of what you want to look at. And once you've kind of got all those, how do you interpret those? Well, first, do know that data is meant to drive discussions. Great analysis always leads to great questions. 99.9% of the time, we get new clients uploaded into Fundraising Report Card. They start looking at their metrics, all the dashboards that we have and all the KPIs. The first thing they start doing is asking questions internally about, what does this mean? What are we doing? What strategy do we think impacted that? That's one of the most important aspects of looking at data and looking at metrics and interpreting them is understanding that it should drive critical discussions about the program. After analyzing your historical trends, you should be able to identify some events and activities that played a role. Remember, I discussed the organization that didn't have major giving staff. Well, that trend showed itself, and you know specifically what crucial event we lost a major giving staff. Let's not repeat that. Let's always have major giving staff on track. The organization in the beginning that had decreases in the growth of donors, but increases in the donations year over year over year. What were the crucial events there? The crucial event was that they decided to pursue a strategy of upgrading individuals and leading more with mid-market and major giving fundraising. And that played a role in how those numbers came to be. So that's why data is critically important for planning future strategies. You discuss what the numbers mean, you'll see the big picture. Data without narrative is useless, and data with a story is compelling. And I challenge you to have a compelling data story for your organization that syncs in with your strategy. If you have specific strategies implemented and you're measuring data, your data metrics are showing you're going in the wrong direction, then your strategies and the tactics that support those are not working. So that's why it's super important for what you do. Only after you look internally would you want to then begin looking outside. The first thing that people ask, certainly at the most senior levels, as soon as you start doing data analysis and looking at your metrics in your organization, surfacing this stuff, the first question they're going to ask is, well, how does this compare? How does this compare? I'll pose to you that your internal comparisons are far more important than outside benchmarking. If your first-year retention rate is 25% today, and the outside industry benchmarking is 30%, but it used to be 10% last year, I would say you're doing really, really well. Your benchmark against yourself is that you've implemented some strategies and tactics, and you've been able to double your retention rate for your first-year donors. Is it important also to know that outside, higher benchmarking is sort of out there? Yes, but you really need to focus on where you are internally. And because every program is different, as much as, you know, all organizations want to look to these outside benchmarks, I really do implore upon you and your senior executives, look internally first, understand how your organization is unique and how you're improving your metrics, or frankly, those areas that aren't improving, then go outside. Okay, so everyone wants to look outside, so I'm not going to not talk about benchmarking outside. Here are a couple resources, 3 of them to be specific. Fundraising Report Card, we actually have a benchmarking, fundraisingreportcard.com/benchmark that's in beta, so it's a little bit rough, but it's actually some pretty good data out there based on various giving sectors, hospitals, environmental, political. There are a bunch of different sectors that are being measured, and benchmarks are being produced. We have about $39 billion in gifts. We measure a lot of the stuff that I talked about in the beginning of this, those 3 key metrics that I suggest should be your cornerstone. So it's a good place to start. We have an online program. M&R Strategic Services is sort of the go-to for online fundraising. They've got MR benchmarks. You can go out there and look at online benchmarking and see how you compare. And then the biggest player in the space is obviously Blackbaud. Every year they do a big charitable giving report, has lots of information in it that you can look at. Different size organizations. It's a good thing to always have on the shelf. So if you want to kind of look at things, I think they just actually released their 2018 charitable giving report. So that's out there and available for you. But again, don't forget, look internally first against your own past performance, because that's important also. All right, we're rounding out here. I think we're just good on time. I appreciate it. Let me give you a little bit of swag. We have some things that we'd like to send your way. We have a discount. If you are interested in Fundraising Report Card, we have sizes that fit every kind of organization, from $250 all the way to thousands of dollars. We're offering 10% discount to all of the little green light folks who are on here, and anyone else who might be on the webinar today for any of the paid versions. Just email me and we'll make sure we send that to you, and you'll actually get a post-webinar email of this recording, so you can actually just respond to that, and we'll make sure we get a 10% discount in your hands if you're interested in looking at our tool set. We have podcasts and we have blogs. They're free. You can sign up for those. We've got lots of good information on the podcast, lots of great information on the blog. And most importantly, I saved the best for last. We have a wonderful book written by Zach Shefska. He's the Chief Operating Officer here, on metrics that matter. It's a free ebook. I suggest everyone downloads it. But we've sort of just gotten you excited a little bit about analytics and how they might impact your organization. You're thinking, hey, these are really three that I should be looking at: donor growth, donation growth, retention rates, and lifetime value. What else is out there? You're going to get a lot of information and metrics that matter. So our swag is to give you a discount, to offer these free resources in the podcast and the blog, and most importantly, metrics that matter, a fantastic book. Here's a couple more resources I think you might find valuable. If you're looking to tell your data story, and when you look back, we have a great article that we've written on how to actually tell your data story. How do you create a data-driven plan? How do you plan around data? We've got a great article on how you plan, so data-driven fundraising plan is really fantastic. And how do you plan on sharing this with others? I mean, it's one thing to look at data and to use it yourself and think about the strategy and tactics that you're going to be implementing, but you're obviously going to have to share that with others, whether it's development committee, board of directors, your senior executives. And so we actually have how you can share fundraising metrics with your board. It also suits itself to senior executives. So with that, I want to say thank you for joining the webinar today on analytics for small and mid-sized organizations, brought to you both by the great folks at Little Green Light and us here at Fundraising Report Card. If you'd like to log on to Fundraising Report Card, you can do that at fundraisingreportcard.com. We have all kinds of versions of how you can actually analyze your program with a bunch of dashboards and KPIs, 36 dashboards and 12 KPIs. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, my email's right there. Don't be shy. You can email me at ddoyle@fundraisingreportcard.com. I would love to follow up this webinar with a chat about your specific program, your specific metrics, and what your challenges are. So thank you again. I really appreciate you. And on behalf of Little Green Light and Fundraising Report Card, have a fantastic day.